Every generation always claims to have progressed beyond the prejudices of older times. The 19th century wasn't any different. But like most generations, this supposed progress included double standards that actually maintained the status quo, especially concerning women. Elizabeth Stuart Phelps realized this, and used a prototype of the female artist to illustrate these double standards. At a time when women were regarded as simple entertainers at best, Phelps suggested, through the story of Avis, that a creative female could contribute so much more to society. To explain how Phelps would show the role of female professionalism, we need to look at what creative women faced in the 1800s. It wasn't as bad as one might believe today, as women were always allowed to take up a hobby in their free time, even artistic hobbies. Many suggested that females had finally been given some rights solely based on this fact. However, the idea that a woman would leave the domestic sphere for such a profession was unheard of. The hobby should only stay a hobby. A woman shouldn't intrude on a man's work, and should only use scenes of nature, or of domestic life, or of religion, or the like. She should remain at home when she paints, and should never allow art to consume her life. Even worse, Palm, a noted female historian, realized that women artists, quote, had to be much more nuanced in their approach to deviation, unquote. If a woman decided to stir controversy, Palm argued that they could easily lose funding from their male patrons. This meant that the art world essentially blacklisted certain females, especially if they tried to complain of provocative social issues. Avis's journey was the archetype of all these struggles. Like other female artists in this era, Avis found a way to address these issues in her art and life, although through ingenious hidden symbolism. And like other female artists, she ultimately suffers from failure due to her inability to communicate in her stifled world. Avis's career starts off with humiliation, as her father refuses to give her credit or recognition. This professor always boasts to guests about his similarity to William Hamilton through Avis's portrait, but when Avis attempts to gain some help in her career, the father only belittles her and calls the portrait, quote, a pretty little copy. Beyond just infuriating hypocrisy, the professor essentially relegates Avis to the role of entertainment. She isn't the person who made the art, she's just a pet who does an impressive parlor trick for her master. As a result, the professor never imagines that Avis is trying to use her art for self-revelation or communication. Avis's signature work, in fact, is exactly what her father fears, an unrestricted view into the psyche of a woman. Avis uses concentrated alcohol in order to free her mind of societal constraints and magnify her sensations. What she senses are what no male artist could ever hope to paint. Avis envisions a sphinx, a figure of womanly importance and a mystery, along with historical women of power, a sign that Avis is trying to reach a new apex, to become a creative role model, so to say. However, the sphinx's face is mutilating, suggesting that Avis shares with all women of all era a long struggle in her life. The sphinx itself will evolve throughout Avis's life. One literary critic argues that Avis places the silent Arab to, quote, suggest the stultification Avis has experienced, unquote. By the end of the novel, the Sphinx will represent the mystery of womanhood solved by Avis, but with Avis silenced like the Arab due to her marriage. The duties in her marriage are not light as modern-day stereotypes suggest. She provided emotional and physical support to her husband, whose headaches and weak lungs provided him with the perfect excuse for many of his transgressions against his wife, along with his refusal to help with his wife's own share of problems. Avis allows this one-way relationship, but fails to realize the long-term pain and damage which her silent sorrows will cause. Like the hastily drawn Arab, Avis's silence in the burden she carries is unintentional but unavoidable, as her sorrow was, quote, impossible to express without giving useless pain. Kessler argues that Avis at the end of the novel, quote, symbolized every woman who aspired to goals, who then found her striving steps hedged in, unquote. Avis can no longer paint, she has to fall back towards the care of her only remaining child, and her husband has left her alone, for the final time in the novel, in the most absolute of ways, death. Though it may be argued that Avis's failure is due to the inevitable nature of marriage, a more dominant force controls Avis's fate. The insistence that a man has more creative leeway and has more important topics to discuss than a woman is what dooms her. The marriage is only a side effect of this unconscious censorship. Even as she fails, Avis remains hopeful and tries to maintain her creativity in other areas. She hopes, quote, "the stone lips of the Sphinx have begun to mutter," unquote, a clearer reference to a woman attempting to overcome implicit censorship in ways she never could. By acknowledging that her own silence made her marriage an obstacle, Avis hopes to empower a utopian generation of strong women capable of speaking their minds, of expressing their worries, and of arguing their opinions. Possibly even women already born, such as Waits. Even more encouragingly, Avis decides to actively empower this generation, rather than passively allow her experience to stand as an old warning. She hopes to explicitly teach and train Wade how to avoid Avis's mistakes. And Avis has become an art teacher as a way of teaching self-expression to others. To conclude, Avis's fall from a professional career was due to her silent marriage, killing her only voice in art. Avis would never again hope to address the entirety of structural problems which held her down, but she hopes that she can create an entire generation strong enough to tear down themselves. Elizabeth Stuart Phelps correctly identifies by the end of the novel that the first step towards the solution was an acknowledgement of the problems faced by women. More importantly, Phelps showed how a creative female made value in the world through the message of her art and the message she gave to the future. Thank you so much for listening to my PechaKucha.